The file weighs 4 pounds. You know because you weighed it. Sitting alone in a parking garage in Arlington, Virginia, holding a manila envelope that 4 people told you didn't exist. You've been a journalist for 19 years. You've covered wars. You've covered collapsed governments. You've covered men who disappeared after talking to you. Nothing prepared you for this. The file came through a source you'd spent 8 months building. A source who met you only in person. Never phone, never email, never the same location twice. The last time you saw them, they slid this across a table in a diner in Maryland and said 4 words. Don't sit on this. Then they left without finishing their coffee. That was 6 days ago. You haven't slept more than 3 hours since. You open the file for the first time in your own apartment. Curtains closed, phone in another room, laptop disconnected from Wi-Fi. Old habits from a different kind of story. The first page is a log. Dates, locations, names. People whose job was to be invisible. People who saw everything. The log covers 11 years. Private flights, private islands, private residences across 4 countries. Movement patterns so consistent they look like a schedule. Not a social calendar, a system. You've been in this business long enough to know the difference. A social calendar is random, opportunistic, human. A system has rules. A system has a purpose. A system has someone running it. You turn to page 2. Page 2 is a list of properties. You recognize 2 addresses immediately. One in Manhattan, one in Palm Beach. Both well documented, both already public knowledge. But there are 6 more addresses on this list. Locations that have never appeared in any court filing, never appeared in any news report, never appeared anywhere. A townhouse in Paris registered to a shell company dissolved in 2007. A ranch in New Mexico that officially belongs to a defunct agricultural trust. A property in the Virgin Islands adjacent to the island everyone already knows about. And 3 more that your source has marked with a single red asterisk. No explanation for the asterisk, just the mark. You spend 4 hours cross-referencing every address against public records, corporate registrations, property tax filings, FAA records, utility accounts. The shell companies dissolve into other shell companies that dissolve into holding trusts registered in jurisdictions that don't share records with anyone. The paper trail doesn't end, it just becomes invisible. That's not incompetence. That's architecture. On day 2, you start calling people. Not the famous names, the invisible ones. The pilots, the household staff, the people who filed the flight logs. Most don't answer. 3 hang up immediately. 1 listens to your introduction in silence and then says, "You need to understand what you're doing before you keep doing it." You ask what they mean. They say, "I had a lawyer, a good one. He stopped returning my calls in 2019. I found out why 6 months later." You ask if they'll talk on record. Long silence. "My kids are in school here. You understand what I'm telling you." You understand. You move on. By the end of day 2, you have 7 sources who will speak only off record. Each one confirms a piece of the same picture. None of them know about each other. That's how you know the picture is real. When separate people who have never met describe the same room from different angles, you're not dealing with a story anymore. You're dealing with a truth that survived being buried. The names start appearing on day 3. Not the name everyone already knows, the names around that name. Politicians, financiers, a former cabinet member, 2 foreign nationals with government connections in countries that are nominally U.S. allies, a well-known academic, a prominent lawyer who has represented 3 sitting senators. You don't print names without documentation. That's the rule. That's always been the rule. So you go looking for documentation, and that's when things get strange. Court records that should be publicly accessible return errors when you request them. A FOIA request you filed 18 months ago for adjacent documents comes back with 47 out of 50 pages fully redacted. Black page after black page after black page. Someone reviewed those pages and decided that 94% of the content could not be seen by the public. You filed hundreds of FOIA requests in your career. You've never seen 94%. On day 2, someone calls your editor, not you, your editor. The caller doesn't identify themselves. They don't make threats. They simply ask, politely, professionally, in the tone of someone making a reasonable business inquiry, whether your publication is planning any stories related to ongoing federal investigations. Your editor calls you immediately after. She says, "How deep are you in this?" You tell her what you have. There is a long silence on the phone. She says, "I need you to document everything, every source contact, every document, every step." You ask if that means you're moving forward. She says, "It means if something happens to you, I need to be able to reconstruct what you found." You sit with that sentence for a long time. If something happens to you. She didn't say when the story runs. She didn't say if the story runs. She said, if something happens to you. By day 5, you have identified a pattern that isn't in any court document, a financial pattern. Wire transfers routed through 3 different countries before landing in accounts registered to names that don't match any person on any public record anywhere. Your forensic accounting source, someone who has testified in federal court 11 times, looks at the routing diagram you built across 3 whiteboards and says, "This isn't tax avoidance." You ask what it is. Tax avoidance is messy, opportunistic. People grab what they can. She points at the routing diagram you built across 3 whiteboards. This is a payroll system. You ask what she means. Someone was being paid regularly on a schedule through a structure specifically designed to make the payment untraceable and the recipient unidentifiable. You ask who. She looks at you the way people look at you when they've already decided how much they're willing to risk. That's your job. I just read the architecture. On day 6, the source goes silent. No response to the dead drop protocol you'd established. No response to the backup contact method. Nothing. You spend 4 hours trying every agreed channel. Silence. You tell yourself there are 100 innocent explanations. People travel. People get sick. People get scared and go quiet for a while. You've lost sources before. It happens. But this source was the one who said, "Don't sit on this." This source slid a 4-pound file across a table and walked out without finishing their coffee. This source was not the kind of person who goes quiet without a reason. On day 7, you receive a single message through a channel you didn't think anyone else knew about. 4 words. They know you have it. Then silence again. You look at the 4-pound file on your desk. You look at your phone. You look at the door of your apartment. You've been a journalist for 19 years. You've covered wars. You know what it feels like when a story stops being a story and starts being something else entirely. You publish on a Thursday, not because Thursday is special, because by Wednesday night, you'd made the decision that waiting one more day was a choice you couldn't justify to yourself. The story goes live at 6 a.m. By 7 a.m., it has been shared 40,000 times. By 9 a.m., 3 of the names in the story have lawyers issuing statements. By noon, a federal spokesperson confirms an ongoing investigation without confirming any details. By 6 p.m., you have received 211 interview requests and 1 voicemail with no caller ID. 12 seconds of silence. Then a voice you don't recognize says 3 words. There's more files. You stand in your kitchen, holding your phone. 19 years. You know what comes next. More sources who meet only in person. More documents that technically don't exist. More shell companies dissolving into other shell companies. More black pages. More silence where answers should be. More sources who look at you and measure how much they're willing to risk. More mornings at 3 a.m. with a file on your desk and a door you keep looking at. You open your laptop. You start a new document. You type 2 words at the top of the page. File 2. Because this is the job. Not the byline, not the traffic numbers, not the interview requests. This, the 4-pound file. The source who went quiet. The voicemail with 12 seconds of silence. The truth that survived being buried, waiting for someone with 19 years of practice in finding things that weren't supposed to be found. You typed the first line. The file doesn't have a name. Not yet.